Have you ever wondered what really happens after you die? Is it just darkness, a final breath, and then nothing? Or is death just a doorway, a quiet pause before the next unfolding of life? For thousands of years, the Buddha looked deeply into this question, not with belief, not with fear, but with a calm and awakened mind. He taught not to be afraid of death, but to understand it, to see through its illusions, and to live so deeply that even death loses its power over you. In this journey, we'll uncover what the Buddha truly said about death, what happens at the very moment of dying, and why your final thought matters more than your whole lifetime of words. If you've ever lost someone, or feared your own end, let this teaching bring peace to your heart. Because death, as the Buddha taught, is not the end of you. It may just be the beginning. When you pause and breathe deeply, there's something quiet beneath the noise. A stillness, a space that opens up when the fear of death is gently set aside. Most people never go there. They race from moment to moment, hoping that if they move fast enough, death will forget them. But the Buddha didn't run. He turned around and faced death directly, not with panic or resistance, but with stillness and a soft, knowing smile. That's where we begin. In the West, we are conditioned to see death as the ultimate enemy, something to avoid, to delay, to deny. We dress it up in euphemisms. We hide it behind hospital curtains. We speak of losing someone as if they were misplaced, not gone. But no matter what we say or how far we run, death stands quietly behind every moment, reminding us of what truly matters. The Buddha didn't teach about death to scare us or to make us somber. He spoke of it because it's one of the few things every human being shares. Rich or poor, young or old, believer or skeptic, none of us can avoid it. But the way we relate to death shapes everything about how we live. To live fully, we must look at death, not just at the end, but in each passing breath, each fading moment. He taught us the law of impermanence, anicca. It's not a philosophy, but an observation. Everything you can see, touch, or hold onto is in motion. The mountain erodes, the river shifts, the body changes, the people you love grow old, or change, or leave. Nothing in this world is fixed. This could sound painful, but actually, it's freedom. Because when you understand that nothing lasts, you stop expecting it to. You no longer demand that people never change, that health remains forever, or that today should be just like yesterday. You stop clinging and start appreciating. You stop numbing yourself and start truly living. That's what the Buddha taught, not to detach coldly, but to love deeply without possession. He often reminded his followers to meditate on death, not to become obsessed with dying, but to become intimate with reality. Imagine living your day as if it could be your last, not in fear, but in presence. Imagine speaking to the ones you love with full attention, knowing these words might be your final offering. That awareness brings us home to what matters. Most of us live as if we'll never die. We accumulate, plan, argue, and chase things with the illusion that there will always be more time. But when death becomes real to you, not just as an idea, but as a felt truth, your priorities change. The ego quiets down, the heart opens up. Suddenly, you begin to listen more, to forgive more, to let go more quickly. Death softens us, if we let it. The Buddha compared life to a flash of lightning, a drop of dew, a soap bubble catching sunlight. These are not depressing metaphors. They are beautiful, because once you know that everything is passing, you begin to cherish it. You don't waste time on what doesn't matter. You don't cling to what hurts you. You begin to see that even this breath, this moment, is a gift. In the suttas, the Buddha said, all conditioned things are of a nature to arise and pass away. Having arisen, they cease. Their stilling is true peace. He wasn't talking about death as a dramatic ending. He was talking about every moment, every experience that arises in your mind, every sensation that passes through your body. Death is not a future event. It's happening now, in little ways, all the time. So, we begin not by waiting for death, but by meeting it now, in the rising and falling of breath, in the fading of thoughts, in the changing of emotions. When you meditate, when you sit still and simply observe, you begin to notice this. You realize how little control you have over what appears in the mind. A thought comes, then it's gone. A feeling rises, then fades. Even pain doesn't stay forever. Nothing sticks. And when you stop trying to make it stick, you start to find peace. One of the most powerful teachings the Buddha gave is that clinging is the root of suffering. We suffer not because things change, but because we insist that they shouldn't. We want permanence in a world of impermanence. And nowhere does this show up more clearly than in our relationship to death. We don't want to lose the people we love. We don't want to lose this body. We don't want to face what feels like the end. But what if it isn't the end? What if it's a transformation? A doorway? A change of state? The Buddha didn't speak of death as annihilation. He didn't teach that we disappear. Instead, he spoke of continuation. Just as a flame passes from one candle to another. Just as a seed gives rise to a tree and that tree drops more seeds, so too does life flow forward. Shaped by karma, by cause and effect. But before we explore what comes after death, we must understand what death is in the first place. Not just biologically, but spiritually. What is it that dies? What is it that continues? To understand this, the Buddha introduced the teaching of the 5 aggregates: form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. These are the components of what we usually call self. But the Buddha taught that none of these is the self. They are like ingredients in a recipe, always changing, never permanent. Form is the body. It ages. It gets sick. It dies. Feeling is the response to experience, pleasure, pain, neutral. Perception labels what we experience. Mental formations include thoughts, desires, habits, and consciousness is the awareness that experiences all of this. But consciousness too is impermanent. It arises dependent on conditions, on sense contact, on the body, on the mind. When death comes, these aggregates begin to unravel. The body weakens, sensations dull, perceptions blur, thoughts slow, awareness withdraws, and eventually, the processes that made up what we called a person dissolve. But something continues, the movement of karma, the tendencies of the mind, the stream of becoming. This is why the Buddha taught that our final moment matters. Not because it determines everything, but because it reflects the quality of our mind. If we die clinging, afraid, angry, the mind moves in one direction. If we die calm, clear, compassionate, it moves in another. The mind at the moment of death carries momentum, like a boat pushed from shore. And yet, that moment is not separate from every moment before it. Which is why practice begins now. Every time you forgive, every time you let go, every time you sit quietly and watch your breath, you are preparing for death. You are planting seeds for a peaceful passing. You are training the mind to stay present even when everything else falls away. There's a story in the suttas of a monk who died smiling. His fellow monks asked the Buddha why he seemed so joyful. And the Buddha explained, because he had no fear. He had lived a life of awareness. He had trained the mind well. Death did not come as a surprise. It came as a friend. Can you imagine dying like that? With grace? With ease? With a smile? You don't need to be a monk to do that. You just need to live with intention. To keep death in your awareness, not as a threat, but as a reminder to be kind, to pay attention, to let go of what no longer serves you. The truth is, death is not the problem. The problem is our resistance to it. When we let go of that resistance, something amazing happens. We begin to trust life more. We stop needing guarantees. We start to see that even endings can be beautiful. Just like the setting sun doesn't signal failure. Just like autumn leaves don't make us despair. Death is simply part of the rhythm. It's the space between notes and the music. Without it, the song would lose meaning. In one of his last teachings, the Buddha said, "All formations are subject to decay. Strive diligently for your own liberation." These were his parting words. Not dramatic, not poetic, just true. Everything changes. Nothing lasts. So don't waste time. Wake up. As we move forward into the next parts of this teaching, we'll explore more deeply what the Buddha said about the moment of death itself. We'll talk about what the mind experiences as the body lets go. We'll explore the realms of rebirth, the law of karma, and the possibility of breaking free from it all. But for now, just pause. Feel your breath. Notice that even as these words end, something in you remains aware. That awareness is not afraid. That awareness is not dying. That awareness is the beginning of peace. Let that be enough. Just for now. Let it carry you forward. In the quiet space we arrived at before, something inside you might have softened. Maybe a fear lost its grip. Or perhaps just for a breath. Death no longer felt like an enemy. That's not the end of the journey. It's the beginning of deeper seeing. Now we begin to ask, with the same calm curiosity the Buddha encouraged, what is death? Really? Most people think of death as a moment. A heartbeat stops. A breath ceases. A declaration is made. This person is gone. But the Buddha's vision of death is much more nuanced. To understand death, we must first understand what it is that dies, and what it is that was never truly born. The self we believe in, the me we carry around each day, is actually a collection of processes. Not a solid identity. The Buddha taught that what we call a person is made up of 5 components, called aggregates: form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. These are not abstract ideas, they are direct experiences. The body you inhabit, the feelings that arise, the way you label things, the thoughts that swirl in your head, the awareness that knows it all. Each of these 5 aggregates is in flux. None of them is stable. None of them is you. They're like a whirlpool, a shape made of movement. When we say someone dies, what we're really seeing is the unraveling of these aggregates. The whirlpool disperses. The patterns break apart. Form, the body, ceases. Organs shut down. Muscles relax. Warmth fades. That's the part most people notice. But at the same time, perception and feeling begin to dissolve. Mental formations slow. Consciousness becomes faint, then disappears. But here's the critical point. None of these things were ever self to begin with. They were part of a conditioned process. Imagine watching a flame. It flickers. It moves. It lights up a room. Then the fuel runs out. The flame doesn't go somewhere, it ceases. But if you take that flame and light another candle, the fire continues in a new form. That's how the Buddha described the continuation of consciousness. It doesn't transfer like a soul jumping bodies. It continues like a process fueled by causes and conditions, karma. So what happens in that transition? Between the final breath and the next beginning? The Buddha spoke of a subtle but powerful moment at death. The dissolution of the 5 aggregates and the momentum of mind shaped by karma. At the time of death, the state of the mind becomes especially important. Why? Because in that moment, everything else has fallen away. The body no longer serves you. The senses no longer feed you. Only the mind remains. If your last thoughts are tangled in fear, resentment, or confusion, those impressions shape the next becoming. But if your final state is peaceful, clear, rooted in compassion or faith, that too sets a course. The dying moment, in Buddhism, is not about judgment from the outside. It's a natural unfolding. The mind follows its habit. This is why, throughout Buddhist cultures, so much care is given to the process of dying. Monks chant, "Loved ones guide the mind of the dying toward calmness." People are encouraged not to cry loudly or cling, so the dying person can let go peacefully. It's not superstition, it's spiritual psychology. And even for those who die suddenly, the state of the mind throughout life still leaves an imprint. Nothing is wasted. Every thought, every act, every intention contributes to the momentum of who you become. This is not meant to burden you, it's meant to empower you. You are not a victim of fate. You are the artist of your own becoming. So, is death an end? Yes, and no. It's the end of a particular configuration, a pattern of body and mind. But it's not the end of the stream. The stream continues. The Buddha called this stream of consciousness bhavanga, the underlying flow of mental activity. When death comes, the conditions that held this form dissolve, but the flow moves forward, conditioned by karma. This is not meant to be taken as dogma. The Buddha never said, "Believe this blindly." He invited us to observe, to reflect, to see for ourselves. And even if you don't know what comes after, you can begin to see how mind creates experience, how patterns repeat, how habits shape our lives. That's rebirth, even here and now. Before continuing further, just pause and feel the breath again. Inhale, exhale, watch it come, watch it go. Birth and death, every moment. In the next parts of this teaching, we'll explore the actual moment of death in even more detail, the changes in consciousness, the role of karma, and the opportunities for liberation that lie in that transition. But for now, just stay here, in this awareness, in this breath, and let the understanding settle deep. Let's look a little deeper into what the Buddha revealed about the dying process. In the moments leading up to death, a quiet shift begins. The physical body starts to release its hold. Breathing slows. The senses become dull. The mind, though, remains active, at least for a while. And within that mind, something important is unfolding. According to the ancient texts and the meditation masters who deeply examined death through mindfulness, the mind begins to narrow its focus. Like a camera lens zooming in, the past becomes distant. The future is inaccessible. Only the present sensation, the present state of consciousness, remains. For some, this brings fear. For others, peace. But in either case, it becomes the defining moment of the next step. The Buddha taught that our final thought, the very last mental impression, holds immense weight. This isn't a matter of superstition. It's about momentum. Imagine your mind as a boat, and all your thoughts, words, and actions are the currents beneath it. At death, the boat is launched forward by those accumulated forces. And the final thought? It's like the wind in the sail. It sets the direction. This is why, throughout the Buddhist path, we're encouraged to cultivate wholesome habits of mind, not just to be morally good for its own sake, but to prepare ourselves for that final transition. A person who practices kindness, generosity, patience, and mindfulness builds an inner landscape that leads naturally toward peace at death. A mind filled with craving, hatred, or confusion is like a stormy sea. It's harder to navigate. But even if a person has lived an imperfect life, and who hasn't, there is still power in that final moment. If someone can remember a single act of kindness, a deep intention of compassion, or the name of the Buddha with sincere trust, that moment can shift the direction of their consciousness. In some Buddhist traditions, the practice of recalling the Buddha's name at the moment of death, what we call buddhanusati, is central. Not because saying the name magically saves you, but because turning the mind toward purity, clarity, and awakening opens the heart. It uplifts the final thought. It orients the mind toward the light. Modern neuroscience has even begun to notice that people near death often recall strong memories, flashbacks, or meaningful emotional moments. From a Buddhist perspective, these are not random. They are karmic residues rising to the surface. They come with energy. They shape what comes next. In Tibetan Buddhism, this process is mapped out in exquisite detail through the Bardo Thodol. Often translated as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, it describes the stages of consciousness after physical death, the lights and visions one might encounter, and how a trained practitioner can recognize them as projections of the mind, not ultimate reality. While this teaching is specific to a tradition, the essence echoes the Buddha's universal message. What we experience after death is deeply connected to the state of our mind at that time. But even without entering complex cosmology, we can return to the simplicity of what the Buddha himself emphasized: impermanence, karma, and mindfulness. Impermanence reminds us that death is natural, not personal. Karma reminds us that nothing is random. Every action has its echo. And mindfulness gives us the power to choose how we respond, how we meet each moment, even the final one. So let's imagine this moment. Not morbidly, but gently. You are lying down. Breathing slows. Sensation fades. Memory unravels. All that remains is awareness. What will fill that awareness? Will it be regret? Anger? Or will it be peace? Gratitude? Surrender? The answer lies in how you live now. This is why Buddhist practice isn't reserved for monks or scholars. It's for all of us. You don't need robes or rituals to prepare for death. You need honesty. You need intention. You need to be willing to see clearly and love deeply. That's it. In truth, every breath is a rehearsal. Every evening when you fall asleep, you practice letting go. Every moment of mindfulness is a small dying, a release of clinging. And every time you let go of a grudge, a fear, a craving, you become more familiar with freedom. There is a freedom in dying well. Not because you escape anything, but because you no longer resist what is. The Buddha didn't promise that death would be easy, but he showed us that it could be peaceful. And more than that, he showed us that death could be a gateway, not a grave. When the mind is clear and fearless, the moment of death becomes spacious. It becomes luminous. It becomes, perhaps, the most sacred moment of your life. And in that space, there may arise a profound possibility, not just of rebirth, but of release. But we're not there yet. We're still breathing. We're still alive. And that means the work continues. Let's continue it together in the next section. To live with death in your awareness is not a curse, it's a form of wisdom. When we forget death, we waste time. We speak carelessly. We chase things that leave us empty. But when we remember that our time is finite, our hearts become sharper. Our minds grow clearer. We begin to act not from habit, but from presence. This is one of the great gifts of the Buddha's teachings on death. They are not about dying, they're about living with depth. With mindfulness, with love, the way we live becomes the way we die. And the way we die becomes the way we live again. If that cycle continues, there's a story told of a king who asked the Buddha's disciples, "What's the one thing you've learned that has changed your life the most?" The disciple replied, "That I may die at any moment." The king laughed and said, "I know that too." But the disciple smiled and answered, "You know it with your mind. I know it with my bones." To know something deeply, to let it change how you see, how you speak, how you breathe, that's real understanding. That's wisdom. It's not about collecting teachings. It's about being transformed by them. So how do we let the awareness of death become a friend? Not a fear? We begin small. We pause in the middle of the day and remember, I will not live forever. We reflect before speaking harshly. Is this worth it? We forgive someone not because they deserve it, but because we no longer want to carry anger to the grave. We give a little more. We hold a little less tightly. We bow to the mystery, not trying to solve it, but learning to walk inside it with grace. The Buddha said that the greatest reflection is maranasati, mindfulness of death, not to dwell in sorrow, but to awaken. It's the reminder that time is precious, that today matters, that how you show up in this moment matters more than your titles, your achievements, your regrets. And if we take this reflection seriously, not with heaviness, but with reverence, our entire life begins to change. We eat more slowly. We listen more deeply. We love more honestly. We pray not for more time, but for more awareness within the time we have. And when the end does come, whether expected or sudden, we are not strangers to it. We have met it before. In 1,000 small ways. We have bowed to it. We have learned from it. We have used it as a compass for how to live. This is the gift of Buddhist practice. It prepares us not just to die well, but to live beautifully. It gives us the tools to navigate the greatest unknown not with fear, but with presence, with clarity, with compassion. And if you've ever sat beside someone who is dying, you know this is true. You can feel the sacredness in that space, the slowing of time, the stripping away of everything false. What matters in those final hours is not what we owned, but what we offered, not what we achieved, but what we loved, not what we feared, but what we understood. So let this truth guide you now. Let death be your teacher. Let it walk beside you, not as a shadow, but as a reminder of light. There is nothing to be afraid of when you live in truth. There is nothing to lose when you live with awareness. And there is nothing to regret when you've loved without holding back. In the next part of our journey, we will go further into the question so many carry quietly in their hearts. What happens next? What are the realms the Buddha spoke of? What is rebirth, not as belief, but as insight? And how can understanding it help us become more free, more awake? Right here and now, we will meet those questions gently, together. But for now, breathe. You are still here, and that is a gift. Let's not waste it. If we've begun to understand that death is not the end, but a transition, then the next natural question arises. What follows that transition? Where does consciousness go? What happens to the stream of becoming once the body dissolves? The Buddha didn't leave this question unanswered. In fact, much of his teaching was rooted in helping beings understand the vast and subtle workings of rebirth, what he called samsara, the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. But the beauty of his teaching is this: it wasn't meant to frighten or confuse. It was meant to liberate. Let's begin gently, by remembering something from your own life. Have you ever had the sense that there's more to you than this lifetime? A moment of déjà vu so vivid it shook you? A connection with someone that felt older than time? A fear or talent that seemed to appear without cause? While these things don't prove rebirth, they invite us to question the simplicity of the idea that we begin and end with a single life. The Buddha's insight goes deeper. He described rebirth not as a soul traveling from one body to another, but as a process, conditioned, impersonal, law-governed, just as fire is passed from one candle to the next without transferring a substance. Consciousness continues not as a fixed identity, but as a current shaped by karma. Karma, in its most basic form, means action, but more than action, it's the intention behind the action. Every time we think, speak, or act with intention, we plant a seed. That seed doesn't always bear fruit in this lifetime, but it never disappears. It becomes part of the stream, part of the momentum that carries consciousness forward. So when the aggregates dissolve at death, the karmic momentum doesn't stop. The mind, conditioned by its past intentions, seeks a new form, a new set of conditions through which to express itself. And that becomes the next birth. This process is automatic, not controlled by a god or fate. It is, the Buddha said, like a wheel turning. Unless something intervenes, unless awakening occurs, the wheel continues. The kinds of rebirth the Buddha described are many. There are human rebirths, like the one you're experiencing now. There are animal realms, ghost realms, heavenly realms, and hell realms, but it's essential to understand these are not places in the way we imagine places. They are states of consciousness. Some are more joyful, some are more painful, all are impermanent. Rebirth in a human form, the Buddha taught, is rare and precious. Why? Because it offers both the clarity to understand suffering and the freedom to transcend it. In lower realms, the suffering is too intense to reflect. In higher realms, the pleasure is too distracting. But in human life, there is just enough pain to motivate awakening, and just enough joy to make the path possible. That's why this life matters so deeply. You're not just here by accident. You didn't just randomly appear in a body with the capacity to listen to these teachings. You've arrived here as the result of thousands of intentions, hundreds of lifetimes, and a deep karmic readiness. This life is a rare opportunity, not to escape life, but to free yourself from the cycle that binds it. But let's come back for a moment to a more intimate space. Imagine someone you love who has passed away. Maybe a parent, a child, a friend. Where did they go? Did they vanish? Are they resting, watching, waiting? The Buddha never encouraged blind belief in specific destinies. Instead, he encouraged reflection. What kind of life did they live? What kind of mind did they cultivate? What habits of heart did they carry into their final breath? That gives us a sense, not certainty, but direction. And from that direction comes compassion. Rather than clinging or despairing, we're invited to love them by loving what they stood for, to continue their goodness, to send them metta, loving kindness, from wherever we are. And in that act, we participate in something mysterious and sacred, the interconnectedness of all beings across time. This is not theoretical. This is how death becomes part of life again. You no longer fear it. You see it as a doorway. Not an end, not a punishment, but a pause in the great movement of consciousness. A pause where karma ripens. And where the heart, if it is wise, lets go. And what about your own next becoming? That's what we'll reflect on next. Now let's bring the question closer. If rebirth is real, what determines where we go next? What makes one being return as a human and another fall into suffering? Why are some lives filled with opportunity, while others begin in darkness? The answer the Buddha gave was both empowering and sobering. It is karma. Not karma in the shallow sense of reward and punishment, but karma as cause and effect, deep, subtle, and precise. Every action we take, physical, verbal, mental, leaves a trace. These traces, stored in the field of mind, shape our tendencies, our experiences, our very perception of the world. Over lifetimes, they become currents, guiding the unfolding of new birth. It's not a cosmic scorecard. It's more like a seed in its fruit. You plant kindness, and over time, kindness grows. You plant cruelty, and it returns, maybe not immediately. But when the conditions are right, karma is not destiny. It is potential. It can be purified. It can be transformed. So the key becomes mindfulness. Living with enough awareness that we stop sowing the seeds of suffering and start cultivating the seeds of freedom. Each time we choose compassion over anger, honesty over deception, stillness over reactivity, we shift the stream of becoming. We shape not only this life, but the next one too. But what happens in that mysterious space between death and rebirth? Is there a gap? A moment of pure awareness? A time of reflection? Different Buddhist traditions answer this differently. In early teachings, rebirth is described as immediate, like one candle lighting another. In later traditions, especially in Tibetan Buddhism, there is a transitional state called the bardo. In this in-between realm, consciousness moves through visions, sounds, and emotions shaped by its past karma. There's still an opportunity here. If the mind is trained, it can recognize these experiences as projections, not ultimate reality, and awaken even in that moment. But these teachings are not meant to make us cling to maps of the afterlife. Their purpose is practical, to encourage us to train the mind now, so that no matter what arises, whether in this life or the next, we can meet it with clarity. So we come back to this very moment. Ask yourself, if I were to die today, what would move forward? What would continue? Not your house, not your job, not your reputation, but your habits of mind, your intentions, your unresolved fears, your acts of love. That's the thread. That's the stream. This awareness doesn't need to make us anxious. It can make us awake. Because every moment of anger that you choose to soften, every judgment you choose to release, every breath you take with full attention, that's you changing your karma. That's you creating a better path for this life and beyond. We can also ask a more hopeful question. Is liberation from this cycle possible? The Buddha's answer was clear, yes. That is the heart of his teaching. Not only that death leads to rebirth, but that awakening leads to freedom. When we no longer cling to identity, when we see the aggregates as empty of self, when craving is extinguished, the wheel stops, the stream dries up. That is nibbana, not a place, but a state beyond becoming, unconditioned, unborn, undying. But the Buddha never insisted that we leap to the end. He said, start where you are. Clean the heart, train the mind, see clearly. Little by little, step by step, the illusions begin to fall away. And in their place, space opens up, a space where death no longer frightens you. A space where compassion becomes natural. A space where life begins to feel spacious, even in its struggles. So this teaching isn't just about what happens after death. It's about how we meet life before death. It's about how we shape the momentum of mind. It's about living in such a way that when the body falls away, the heart is ready. Maybe this idea of multiple lives feels strange. Maybe you're still unsure. That's okay. The Buddha welcomed doubt, not as an obstacle, but as a doorway. He never asked for blind belief. He asked you to look at your life, your mind, your suffering, and see, are you caught in cycles? Do patterns repeat? Do you long for peace? Then begin. Because in the end, what matters is not what you believe, but how you live, and how you die, and how you're reborn. Let's go deeper into that, into what true freedom from rebirth looks like, in the next part. Now that we've looked at the stream of rebirth, the law of karma, and the possibilities that unfold after death, the question becomes, is there an end to it all? Or are we bound forever to keep circling through lives? Clinging, craving, losing, grieving? The Buddha's answer was radical. There is an end, and that end is freedom, not escape. Not numbness, but a deep and unshakable peace. A peace that arises not from controlling life, but from seeing through the illusions that make suffering possible in the first place. That peace is called nibbana, or nirvana. What is it? It's not a place. It's not a heaven in the sky. It's not some blank void. It's the cessation of craving. It's the blowing out of the fire of greed, hatred, and delusion. And when those flames are extinguished, something luminous remains, something that cannot be touched by time or death. The Buddha didn't describe it much, not because it was secret, but because it cannot be understood by words. He said it is unborn, unbecome, unmade, unconditioned. It's not something you go to. It's something you uncover when everything falls away. And the beauty of it? It's not only available after death. It's here, now, hidden beneath the noise of the mind. Every time you stop clinging, every time you see through a thought, every time you respond with wisdom instead of reaction, you taste it. You touch the edge of freedom. For most of us, that freedom is glimpsed in moments. A flash of stillness, a moment of profound letting go. But even those glimpses change us. They give us faith. They guide the heart. You might wonder, If nibbana is the end of rebirth, then who continues? If there's no self, what is liberated? That's one of the great koans of the Dhamma. The Buddha didn't say there is someone who is reborn, or someone who is freed. He said that craving causes becoming. And when craving ceases, becoming ends. It's a process. When the process stops, the illusion of self dissolves. So instead of asking, "What happens to me when I die?" try asking, "What is it that I'm clinging to right now? What belief? What fear? What desire?" That's where the real work is. That's where death begins, not the physical death, but the death of illusion. And here's something quietly revolutionary. You don't need to wait for your final breath to begin that work. You can begin dying now. Dying to anger, dying to greed, dying to the need to be right, dying to the fear of what's next. And in each small death, you come alive. There's a peace beyond understanding waiting for you, not after lifetimes. Not in some distant realm, but in this very breath. If you meet it fully. This is what the Buddha offered, not dogma, not fear, but freedom. The freedom to know that you are not this body, not these thoughts, not these emotions. You are awareness itself. And awareness is not born, and does not die. So how should we live? Knowing this? We live gently. We live mindfully. We live in a way that honors the preciousness of each breath. We live in service of truth, not ego. We live with compassion, because every being is caught in the same wheel, longing for peace. And when death comes, we don't run, we bow, we breathe, we let go. And in that letting go, something opens. It's not the end. It's not the beginning. It's just this. The moment you've been avoiding. The truth you've always known. The stillness that holds all things. You are already home. If death is certain and its timing unknown. And if what follows is shaped by the state of our mind and the karma we've cultivated, then a natural, urgent question arises. How do we live in a way that prepares us well? The Buddha's answer wasn't hidden in cryptic rituals or distant doctrines. It was present, practical, and entirely within reach. He taught that the way we prepare for death is by preparing for this moment. The way we meet the end is by learning how to meet now. When people think of preparing for death, they often imagine legal documents, medical plans, or last goodbyes. But the Buddha pointed to something far more intimate, the mind. The state of your mind is what you take with you when you die. That's the real inheritance. That's the real preparation. So the question becomes, what are we cultivating now? In the quiet moments of our life? Are we growing stillness, clarity, compassion? Or are we reinforcing fear, restlessness, and regret? The practice of mindfulness, what the Buddha called sati, is the anchor in this process. To be mindful doesn't just mean to notice the breath. It means to remember what matters. It means to return again and again to the present with kindness and attention. And in doing that, we begin to train the mind for death, not through force, but through familiarity. When you sit quietly and watch the breath, something subtle happens. You begin to notice that everything rises and passes. A thought comes, then goes. A feeling arises, then fades. A memory surfaces, then dissolves. The body shifts. The mood changes. And yet, awareness remains. This is the beginning of death training. You are learning how to let go without fear. You are learning how to stay present while everything else moves. And that's exactly what dying will require. In fact, every time you experience a change, whether it's the loss of a job, the end of a relationship, or even just the end of a day, you are rehearsing. You are being given the chance to practice what it means to let go without resistance. To say goodbye with grace. To remain awake when something ends. And with each small practice, the heart softens. The mind becomes more spacious. The grip of clinging begins to loosen. The Buddha never promised that this would be easy. But he showed, through his own awakening, that it is possible. In the final days of his life, when the Buddha lay ill, surrounded by disciples, he didn't panic. He didn't try to escape what was unfolding. He gave teachings. He remained steady. He reminded them of impermanence. He encouraged them to be lamps unto themselves. And then, when the time came, he entered deep meditation. He passed through the stages of absorption. And then he let go, fully, peacefully, completely. That's not just a story from long ago. It's a mirror. It's a signpost. It's a possibility that lives in each of us, if we're willing to train the mind now. And the training doesn't require a monastery. It happens in the kitchen, while washing dishes. It happens in the car, while waiting at a red light. It happens in conversation, when you choose to listen instead of argue. It happens in the heart, when you decide to forgive instead of hold on. These small moments of presence, these tiny acts of letting go, they build the inner strength you'll need at the hour of death. Because death isn't the place to begin practicing. It's the place where your practice shows itself. So start now. Wherever you are, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be honest. You just need to show up. That's the invitation. In the next section, we'll explore how compassion plays a role in preparing the mind for death, how love, when practiced without attachment, becomes the bridge between this life and the next. If mindfulness is the ground of preparation, then compassion is the heart. The Buddha didn't teach a cold or sterile path. He taught a path full of warmth, rooted in loving kindness, metta, compassion, karuna, and wisdom, panya. And this is especially important when we speak of death. There is a deep truth that many people only discover near the end of their lives. That what mattered most was how well they loved. Not how much they owned. Not how much they achieved. But how gently they treated others. And how honestly they forgave. This, too, is part of the path. Compassion doesn't just prepare us to help others die well. It transforms how we ourselves face death. When we live with a heart open to others, we're less afraid to let go. When we've resolved our grudges, when we've spoken our gratitude, when we've extended forgiveness to those who've hurt us, death no longer feels like something unfinished. It becomes a natural closing. So part of our death preparation is asking, is there anyone I need to forgive? Is there anything I need to say? Is there any love I've withheld that I could offer now? These are not morbid questions. They are life-affirming. They clear the heart. They soften the mind. They remind us that we are all just passing through this moment together, fragile, luminous, brief. In Buddhist practice, one of the most powerful exercises is the metta meditation, sending loving kindness to ourselves, to those we love, to strangers, and even to those we find difficult. Not to condone harmful behavior, but to free our own hearts from the weight of hatred and fear. Because at the moment of death, what rises most easily is what we've practiced. If we've practiced love, love will come. If we've practiced clinging, clinging will come. If we've practiced letting go, peace will come. And if we want to support others in their dying, the best gift we can offer is our own calm presence. Not fixing, not preaching, just being there, holding a hand, speaking a word of love, whispering a chant, sitting in silence. This simple, grounded presence can guide a soul more surely than all the medicine in the world. There's a phrase in the Buddhist texts, the wise die like a lion slipping into the forest. Quiet, unafraid, aware. But such a death doesn't happen by accident. It happens through practice, through choosing, again and again, to meet life fully, through remembering, again and again, that each moment is preparation. So let yourself live with that kind of clarity. Not as a burden, but as a freedom. If you knew you had a year to live, what would change? If you knew you had a month, a week, a day, would you love more openly? Would you speak more kindly? Would you worry less about what doesn't matter? That's the gift of remembering death, not to scare us, but to wake us up, to remind us that this life, This body, this breath, they are not forever. And that's what makes them precious. So we hold them lightly. We love deeply. We forgive completely. And we prepare not just to die well, but to live fully. Now, in the next section of our journey, we'll explore what it means to actually be with death as it happens, what the teachings say about the final breath, and how awareness can be held steady even in the last moment of this life. Now that we've explored how to live in a way that prepares the heart for death, we turn to one of the most intimate, sacred moments of all, the moment of dying itself. It's something we'll each go through. No one escapes it, but how we meet that moment, that is still ours to shape. The Buddha described the death moment not as an ending, but as a shift. The body begins to release its grip. The five senses fade. The external world starts to dim. But internally, something else continues. The stream of consciousness, the flow of awareness, remains active for a time. And in that space, the deepest truths of our life come forward. People often wonder, what will it feel like? Will it be painful, peaceful, confusing? The answer, from the Buddhist view, is, it depends on the mind. If your mind is trained in presence, then as the body lets go, you'll know what to do. You'll remain calm. You'll stay steady. You'll let go with awareness. But if the mind is filled with regret, with resistance, with fear, then the process can feel stormy, like a boat caught in waves. That's why the teachings emphasize so much the importance of preparing now. Because in that final moment, all the distractions will fall away. The social masks, the small dramas, the roles you've played, gone. What will remain is the bare, naked mind, and what that mind is filled with, that will shape what comes next. In Buddhist tradition, it's often said that the last thought before death carries enormous karmic weight. It sets the direction of rebirth. It's like the last turn of the wheel before the vehicle changes paths. So the goal isn't to have a perfect last moment, but to live in such a way that the mind naturally inclines toward peace when that time comes. There are countless stories in the Buddhist canon of people who died with mindfulness, and even attained awakening in their final breath. Not because they were saints their whole lives, but because they used their last moment wisely. One such story is of Channa, a monk who suffered great physical pain in his final days. Yet even in the midst of suffering, he remained mindful, present, aware of the impermanence of all things. When he passed, his mind was steady, and the texts say he was liberated. Contrast that with the story of someone who dies in confusion, grasping, panicked, angry. Their final moments are full of clinging, and that clinging propels the mind into a realm of more suffering. Not as punishment, but as cause and effect. This is why, in many Buddhist cultures, the hours and minutes surrounding death are treated with great reverence. Silence is kept, chanting may be offered, family and friends are asked not to weep loudly or create confusion. Why? Because the dying mind is sensitive. It is open, it is transitioning, and every impression matters. If you are fortunate enough to be near someone who is dying, your presence matters more than your words. Be still, be loving. If you speak, speak gently. If you touch, touch with care. Let your whole being say, you are safe. You can let go. You are loved. And if you yourself are approaching death, whether through age or illness, let this be your practice, to let go of the body, the roles, the name, the story, to come home to awareness itself, to the part of you that was never born and never dies. Some traditions encourage the practice of recollecting the Buddha, or repeating a sacred phrase, like Buddho or Namo Amitabha, to anchor the mind. Not as magic, but as medicine, a medicine that brings calm, clarity, confidence. Others practice focusing on the breath until the breath is no longer available. And then they shift awareness inward, to space, to stillness, to the very knowing that has watched the breath all along. There is no one method. What matters is that the mind is trained, that it knows how to be steady, that it has walked these paths before. In meditation, in forgiveness, in stillness, because then, even if fear arises, it will pass. Even if pain arises, it will pass, and something deeper will remain. And what is that deeper thing? The Buddha never gave it a name, but he pointed to it with every word, every silence. It's not a thing, it's not a place, it's awareness, it's peace, it's home. As the body begins to shut down, the senses withdraw, sight fades, hearing may continue for a while longer. Then that, too, goes. The breath slows, muscles relax, the pulse weakens. Eventually, the breath ceases altogether. But from a Buddhist view, this is not the full end. What appears still on the outside is still transitioning on the inside. The mind, no longer tethered to the body, begins to separate. The elements, earth, water, fire, air, dissolve in sequence. The inner sensations become subtle. Space opens. Thought may still arise. Light may appear. Fear or joy may come. Visions may unfold. This stage is delicate. It is where the stream of consciousness gathers momentum for its next direction. If the mind has been trained in clarity and letting go, it may recognize these changes not as threats, but as signs. It may rest in the knowing, simply aware, unmoved. This kind of death is a rare gift, a culmination of practice lived honestly and deeply. For most of us, it's likely to be more complex. There may be fear, there may be clinging, and yet, even then, there is still space. The Buddha taught that even in the last flickers of awareness, the opportunity to awaken exists. Even in the final breath, there can be release. That's why the whole path matters. Not just what you do in your final hour, but how you have lived in the thousands of hours before it. Think of your mind like a field. If you've been planting seeds of awareness, of love, of stillness, then when death comes, those are the crops that will rise. If your field is tangled with weeds of anger, fear, or regret, then that's what may appear. But even weeds can be pulled. Even in the final season, healing can happen. And that's why forgiveness is such a powerful death practice. Forgiving others, forgiving yourself, letting go of old stories, old wounds, saying what needs to be said, releasing what needs to be released. This doesn't just free your heart, it clears the path ahead. Many great teachers say that if we want to know how someone will die, watch how they live. Do they live honestly? Do they face their fears? Do they speak the truth? Do they act from love? If so, they're already preparing, even if they don't realize it. Every act of truth is a rehearsal. Every moment of stillness is a preparation. And even if you feel unprepared, even if death comes suddenly, you are never without support. The Buddha left us tools. You can always come back to the breath. You can always remember. This is not the end. This is a change. You can always call the mind back with loving kindness. Repeating words like, safe, peace, let go. You can also dedicate your own life as a support for others. Be the calm presence. Be the voice that says, you don't have to be afraid. Be the one who reminds the dying that they are not alone. Because in truth, none of us are alone in death. We are joined by all those who have died before us, all those who will die after. We are part of the great unfolding of life, of change, of becoming. We are waves in a vast ocean, not separate, not lost, but returning to something far beyond our names. So let your life become your practice. Let your practice become your death. Let your death become your freedom. And let your freedom become your gift to the world. In the next part of this journey, we'll explore what happens after death, how the process of rebirth unfolds, how realms of existence are shaped, and what the Buddha said about how to guide our next becoming with clarity and peace. So what happens next? We've followed the mind through the dying process, the final breath, and the gentle or turbulent dissolving of the physical form. But when the body is completely gone, and the breath no longer returns, what continues? According to the Buddha's teachings, what continues is not a self, not a soul, not a fixed identity, but a stream, a process, a conditioned momentum of mind and intention. This is what is often called vijnana, consciousness. And it doesn't vanish. It moves. But it doesn't move randomly. It moves according to law. Just as gravity pulls a falling stone toward the earth, karma pulls consciousness toward its next experience. What kind of experience? That depends entirely on the quality of mind in the moment of death and the overall shape of one's karma. Imagine the mind like a bowl of water with different colors of dye: anger, greed, love, wisdom, fear. The final thought is like a drop that falls into the bowl at the last second and shifts the whole tone of the mixture. That drop can tilt the direction of rebirth. But karma is complex. It's not only the last moment that counts. It's the pattern built over a lifetime, sometimes lifetimes. That's why some people seem to pass peacefully even after a difficult life. And others struggle even after years of spiritual effort. The karmic seeds ripen in mysterious but lawful ways. No moment is wasted. No action disappears. So where does the stream go? The Buddha described 6 primary realms of rebirth, each one reflecting a different quality of mind. These aren't mythological in the way we might think. They are deeply psychological and symbolic, yet also real in their own dimensions. The human realm is the one we know best. It is marked by a balance between pleasure and pain, clarity and confusion. This realm, while not free of suffering, offers the best conditions for awakening. Why? Because we can reflect, we can feel deeply, we can choose. Above the human realm are the heavenly realms, Deva worlds. These are states of great bliss, beauty, and light. Beings there live long lives, free from pain, but their peace is not eternal. When the merit that brought them there fades, rebirth continues. These realms can be seductive, but they lack the urgency to awaken. Below the human are realms of increasing suffering. The animal realm is governed by instinct, survival, and limited self-awareness. Beings here live in fear, desire, and habitual patterns. Though they feel pain and emotion, they lack the capacity to contemplate the Dhamma. The realm of hungry ghosts, Pitas, is one of insatiable longing. These beings are said to experience constant craving, unable to satisfy their needs. It's a realm of addiction, of unmet desire. You don't have to believe in ghosts to recognize this state. It exists in this world. 2. Then there is the realm of hell beings, intense suffering, fire, and fear. Again, these are not eternal states, but they represent the most painful results of hatred, cruelty, and violence. They are not punishments from a god, but the natural unfolding of karma. These realms are not separate from our present experience. Every day, we move between them. When your mind is filled with love, you taste the heavenly realm. When you're caught in rage, you touch the edge of hell. When you act from instinct, you glimpse the animal realm. When you ache with craving, you feel the ghost world. So these teachings aren't about predicting where we'll go. They're about recognizing where we already are, and choosing, with mindfulness, where we want to stay. The Buddha taught that birth in any of these realms is impermanent. No realm lasts forever. Even the highest heavens dissolve. Even the lowest hells come to an end. What sustains rebirth is craving. What ends it is wisdom. The goal is not to rise to the top of the cycle. The goal is to step off the wheel entirely. But until that happens, the process continues. From the moment of death, the stream seeks new conditions. In some schools of Buddhism, especially Tibetan traditions, there is a teaching about the bardo, the intermediate state. It is said that during this time, The mind passes through visions and experiences based on past karma. If the mind is trained, it can recognize these as illusions and awaken even then. In other schools, the process is described more immediately. Rebirth happens the moment the previous life ends. Like one candle lighting the next. Like waves following each other on the sea. However we picture it, the truth remains. Consciousness is not lost. It continues in a form shaped by the forces of habit, intention, and awareness. That is why how we die matters. And that is why how we live matters even more. In the next part, we'll explore how this understanding can free us, not just from fear of death, but from the cycles of suffering that tie us to becoming again and again. Now that we've seen how rebirth follows the current of karma, a deeper question arises. Must we continue this cycle forever? Is rebirth unavoidable, or can it end? The Buddha's answer is at once profound and liberating. It can end. There is an exit. The wheel of samsara, the endless turning of birth and death, spins only as long as craving fuels it. When craving ends, the wheel stops. That is liberation. That is what the Buddha called nibbana. But this liberation doesn't happen through belief. It happens through insight, through seeing clearly the true nature of all conditioned things, that they are impermanent, unsatisfying, and not self. When this understanding deepens beyond thought, when it becomes embodied, realized, then the grip of craving loosens. The illusion of permanence cracks. The story of me begins to fade. That's when freedom is born. The purpose of knowing about rebirth is not to cling to future lives, or fear bad ones, or even hope for good ones. It's to develop urgency, to understand the stakes, to see that this life is precious precisely because it's impermanent, and that awakening is possible because this moment is alive. So we don't aim to reach heaven, or to avoid hell. We aim to wake up from the entire system. We aim to know, this body will fall, this name will fade, this mind will shift, but what remains when there's no more clinging, that is peace beyond words. The Buddha never spoke of a permanent soul that travels between lives. He spoke of process, of cause and effect, of conditions. The self we identify with is not carried over like a suitcase from one life to the next. Instead, it's more like a flame lighting another flame, no substance passed. But the fire continues. That's why nothing is truly lost, and nothing is truly held. We inherit the results of our actions, not because someone is watching and judging, but because reality works that way. Just like planting a seed brings a tree, not by command, but by nature. And just as a farmer who understands the seasons and the soil can grow a healthy crop, we too can cultivate the conditions for freedom. Through generosity, we let go of greed. Through compassion, we dissolve hatred. Through mindfulness, we weaken delusion. And through wisdom, we begin to see the world as it really is, not as we wish it to be. This kind of seeing is not cold. It's luminous. When you realize that all things are fleeting, you stop grasping, and then you begin to love more deeply. Because you know nothing can be held, but everything can be honored. And when death comes, you won't cling. You'll bow. You'll trust. You'll let go. And that letting go won't be the end. It will be release. In the Buddhist path, it's said there are 4 stages of awakening. At each stage, more and more clinging falls away. First, to identity, then to views, then to subtle desire for existence. Eventually, to everything. The one who has let go of all clinging is no longer bound to return. They may be reborn out of compassion, but not out of karma. Their wheel has stopped, but whether you're there or just beginning, the path is the same: awareness, compassion, truth. These are your tools. These are your anchors. These are your refuge, not temples, not rituals, not dogmas, but the living presence of your own direct seeing. And if you wonder what happens next, if you still feel uncertain, that's okay. You don't need to have it all figured out. Even the Buddha said, don't believe something just because it's written, or spoken, or revered. Believe it because you've seen it for yourself. So look, watch your mind, feel your heart, notice the rising and falling of breath, of thought, of mood. That's rebirth, happening right now. And that's where freedom begins, not in the sky, not in the next life, but in the way you meet this one. In the final part of this journey, we'll bring everything together: life, death, rebirth, freedom, and explore what it truly means to live with death as a teacher, and awakening as the path. So we've traveled far on this path, from the moment of dying, through the mysteries of rebirth, to the vast possibility of liberation. But now we return to where it all began, this life, this breath, this present moment, because no matter how deep the teachings go, they always point back to here. What the Buddha revealed about death was never meant to create fear. It was meant to awaken love, to shake us out of forgetfulness, to remind us that we are not promised tomorrow, and that the way we meet this moment, this very one, is how we shape what comes next. We often live as though we have all the time in the world. We scroll, we postpone, we distract ourselves from the ache in our chest that whispers, something is missing. But the truth is, we don't have time, not in the way we think. Every breath is one less. Every heartbeat is a soft drum carrying us toward an unknown end. And yet, that's not a tragedy. It's a blessing, because when we remember death, not in despair, but with wisdom, it brings life into focus. It strips away what doesn't matter. It shows us what does. It's not about chasing every pleasure, or fearing every risk. It's about being awake, being real, living without regret. The Buddha's teachings don't promise an escape from death. They offer something deeper, peace within it. A peace born not from denial, but from understanding, from seeing things as they are, from letting go of what was never ours to hold. Imagine waking up tomorrow with this one truth burning in your heart: I will die. And I don't know when. Not as a threat, but as a compass. What would you change? How would you speak? How would you love? What would you release? Would you forgive that person you've carried anger toward for years? Would you finally say the words that have waited in your throat? Would you turn off the noise and sit in silence, even for 5 minutes, just to feel the aliveness of now? This is what it means to live with death as a teacher. It doesn't mean being morbid. It means being honest. It means letting the awareness of impermanence make you more gentle, not more afraid. In one of his most famous teachings, the Buddha told a grieving mother, Kisa Gautami, to bring him a mustard seed from a household untouched by death. She searched for days. Every home she visited had lost someone. When she returned, empty-handed, she understood. Death comes for all. Her grief didn't vanish, but her understanding deepened. She became a disciple. This story isn't just about her. It's about us. We all carry loss. We all fear endings. But we can also all awaken. And when we do, our relationship with life changes completely. We no longer cling to what we know will pass. We no longer pretend we are in control. We love more fully, not because it will last, but because it won't. And we start to see, death is not the opposite of life. It's the partner of life. It gives it shape. It gives it meaning. So how do we live with that kind of wisdom? We start simply, by watching the breath, by telling the truth, by softening when we want to harden, by listening when we want to speak, by giving when we feel like taking. Each act becomes sacred. Each moment becomes a step toward freedom. You don't need to wait until you're old or sick or dying to start this path. You can begin now, wherever you are, however messy your life may feel. The Buddha didn't awaken in a palace. He awakened under a tree, in the wilderness, alone, facing everything he had run from. You don't need perfect conditions. You need courage. You need honesty. You need the willingness to meet yourself where you are. And from there, everything unfolds. In the final section, we'll walk together into what it means to die before you die, to let go of the small self, the ego, the fear, and discover what remains when everything falls away. The great paradox of the path is this: to truly live, you must first learn how to die. Not physically, but inwardly. To die to the false. To die to the ego. To let the layers of identity, attachment, and fear fall away, like old skin. This is what the Buddha meant when he spoke of liberation. Not escape, but transformation. To die before you die means to no longer live under the illusion that you are your thoughts, your roles, your possessions, or your past. It means seeing clearly. None of that was ever really you. You are awareness. You are the knowing. You are the space in which life happens. When that truth sinks in, not as an idea, but as a lived reality, something quiet begins to unfold. Fear lessens, clinging softens, love deepens, and life becomes simple. Not easy, but simple. Because you're no longer performing. You're no longer striving to prove or defend. You're just here, alive, awake, free. This is the fruit of the path, not just at death, but in every ordinary moment. You wake up with the sunrise, and you know, this, too, will pass, and so you love it more. You speak to your partner, your child, your friend, and you know, they won't be here forever. And so you listen more deeply. You feel anger rise, and you know, this is a fire I don't have to feed. And so you breathe, you let go. Each of these is a small death. Each of these is a small awakening. Each of these moves you closer to freedom, not by adding more, but by letting go of what was never truly yours. There's a line in the Dhammapada. Better than 100 years lived without wisdom is one day lived with understanding. That is the gift of the teachings on death. Not to make you count your days, but to make your days count. And it begins now. You don't need to be a monk. You don't need to renounce the world. You only need to be present, here and now, with an open heart and a quiet mind. The Buddha walked a path that any of us can follow, not a path of beliefs, but of direct experience. He said, "Come and see," not "come and believe." Come and look at your own mind. Come and feel the weight of clinging. Come and touch the peace that arises when you let go. And when you do, death no longer frightens you, because you've already died to what is false, and what remains is real, steady, unafraid. So let death be your teacher, not someday, but today. Let it teach you how to forgive, how to live simply, how to speak truthfully, how to love without holding back. Let it teach you how to sit in silence and listen for what cannot be lost. And when your final breath comes, as it will for each of us, you will not meet it as a stranger. You will meet it as a friend, because you will know that you have lived well. You will know that you have awakened. You will know that you are free. May you walk this path with courage. May you meet death with peace. May you live fully, fearlessly, and awake.